handouts are, but we want to get them up here. I give them to Brother Kibler. They might be back there. Is there a stack of papers back there? Should be full sheets. They're full sheets. They're hidden. Maybe they auctioned them off. I don't know. Yeah, I didn't get any bacon. It's a bad night. I didn't get any bacon. Brother Carter he gave bacon to Joey this morning, told him, rub this in your father's face. That was the message that Joey said to me. Now, I didn't hear it right from the horse's mouth, but that's what Joey said, so I'm trying to behave myself. A lot of finger pointing. All right, try to get one of these handouts, and what we're going to do is teach on missions a little bit tonight. And I'm just going to do my best to try to maybe help your missionaries. And if you were reading the Serving as Senders book, this course, if you will, that I have taught for years is based around the principles in that book. And then from the 20-something years of travel and spending hours and hours and hours and hours and weeks of my life with missionaries. And I want to get you, if you're willing, to be a help as a sender. And one of the biggest mistakes that people make in churches is just to, a good person will open their heart to the Lord and say, Lord, am I a missionary? Do you want me to go? Lord, I'm willing to do whatever it is that you'd have me to do. And maybe they don't get a yes from the Lord, and maybe the Lord says, I'd like you to serve here in this church, and maybe give to missions and plug into your ministry. And then what people do, good people in churches, they say, okay, I guess God doesn't want me to be a missionary. And so we just say, hey, I'm glad that you're going. And so it's kind of like a little bit of a disconnect where someone is looking at a missionary and they're happy that they're going, but then they're going to go over here and serve and do their business, and they don't think about the missionary. That can happen kind of just categorically in churches. We have many different ministries here, and we cannot be part of every ministry. There is the youth department. There is the school. There is the buses. There is just, all these different ministries that we have, seniors and soul winning and so many things. And some of us are involved in many things, but what I tried to get our church not to do is be like, okay, I am for the bus ministry, so then I totally do not think about anything that has to do with another ministry in our church. I understand our focus is going to be what God has given us. That is just a natural thing to do. But what we don't want to do is just kind of totally turn our back and serve in a different direction, and then this person is serving in completely different directions. So at staff meetings and things like that, even at the core when we have like pastoral meetings, we're trying to keep people informed of what's going on in other ministries. We can pray for them. We can help if we can. We can be as much as we can on the same page, because sometimes even in a church, you get to where you're pulling in different directions. And sometimes people complain. They say, Pastor Bittner's all about the academy. And I say, okay, well, hey, that's his calling. That's what he is. I expect that. Sunday school is number one. And the second hour people, it's second hour, they're the best. Bus number one's the very best bus. Bus number three is the very best bus. Okay, and I like all of that. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Only until we really get really serious and we're trying to kill the other bus route or something. That's when it gets toxic. Okay. And we don't have that in our church, but it can kind of get that way sometimes if we get jealousy over different things. And so when it comes to missions specifically, what I got to get you to do is to be able to not just disconnect as a sender. That is a very important, vital part of the team. And what we've got to be able to do is focus and say, what can I do? What has God called me to or allowed me to do? And that word called sometimes is a little too strong, because then we think, if God doesn't, if Jesus doesn't appear at the foot of my bed and tell me to help missionaries or help and pray for someone or give or encourage, well, then I guess I'm not supposed to do it. There's a lot of right things that we're supposed to do just because it's right to do. And so the best advice I can give you is Earl Hughes' advice. Do you think God would be mad at you if you did? In other words, if it's just a simple, easy thing to do to be a blessing to someone, just do it. That's one of the best ways. Some things you don't have to pray about, the old-timers used to say. So I've taught a few weeks in our couples class, and we've taught about some of these things. If you look down this list, you see 6 different things: moral support, logistical support, financial support, prayer support, communication support, and re-entry support. All are important. And in churches like ours, we emphasize probably missions giving, very important. I mean, the work cannot really go on without the missions giving. And we probably emphasize prayer, which those are really main things. And so I'm not saying that they're subservient to the other things that I'm going to mention, but I'm saying you hear this all the time. You hear financial giving, and you hear good churches. They talk about praying, and they talk about financial gifts, but I think there's a lot of things that we could help our missionaries and we miss. And so I've spent a couple of weeks talking about communication with letters and emails and phone calls in our class. First hour in the couples class, we've talked about moral support, very important. Re-entry support is important. When a missionary comes back, you would think they wouldn't have to prepare, but they have been out of country for many years, and now they're in America, which is like a foreign land. Church is different. People have moved on. Everything looks different. Their kids come back. Maybe they were raised in a foreign country. They don't fit in. They look American, talk American, but they don't think like an American. And it's a very difficult culture shock adjustment period for the young people, for the parents, when they watch the young people, and even for the adults who grew up and spent so many years in America. Re-entry is really important. And usually they prepare a lot when they go. They don't spend a lot of time preparing when they come back. It's just a natural thing. You'd think, well, I don't have to prepare to come home, but you really do. And the military knows that. You have to prepare to come home, but sometimes that's missed when it comes to missionaries. I love this scripture in 2 Timothy chapter 4. I think I put that in your notes, verse 13. And I was telling the class this morning, when you read your Bible and you look at the Pauline epistles, really you should look at them like mission letters, because that's what they are. They're letters to churches, they're report letters, they're letters about the needs, they're letters about the heart feelings, the people that are saved, the people that they're ministering to. He addresses the Romans. You're looking, these are missionary churches, missionary letters. And I love what God puts in His Bible, and He says, "The cloak that I left at Troas with Carpus, when thou comest, bring with thee, and the books, but especially the parchments." And I told our class this morning, that sounds like a missionary letter. And it is. And so I hope that this will help you to look at this when you read your Bible. But there's many things that you can do. And even these first few, again, if you will get that book, that'll be a help to you. Some of the things that I'm going to say tonight are not in any book. It's just things that I've learned along the way. But that book will help you. But tonight we're going to talk about logistics. So your first blank, one need that every missionary has on the field is logistics. Logistics. Logistics is really just kind of that bringing the bullets to the front line. We think of we're in a war, we're in a spiritual war, and just like a soldier needs to be supplied on the battlefield, I mean, so many wars and battles and countries have failed in the field of battle. Why? Because of the supply chain issues. I mean, because of the problems. When someone doesn't have no food or no bullets, hard to fight. And it's the same for our missionaries. And you say, but I'm giving my dollars. Well, there's a lot of other things that they need. Dollars help. My goodness, I mean, if you're a couple and, here in America and you're having financial problems, that will impact your home. It'll impact your relationship, right? I mean, even the best of relationships, that will impact you. And if you don't have any money, it's really hard to do the Lord's work here. And so over there, it's even much more hard, where you probably have to come back. Some of the countries, they can't make money there. I mean, it's against the law. If they get caught selling, doing work, even if they're willing to work with their hands, it's against the law. They'll be thrown out of that country, never to return. So it's not just as easy as it is here. So finances are a big issue, but they're not the only issue. Finances can solve, good finances can solve a multitude of problems. But how many of your home matters and family matters you've had, all your finances are fine, and yet you find you're struggling in your marriage, in spirituality, in whatever it is, the endeavor you're doing, the ministry that you're doing, right? So finances don't solve everything. And the missionary is not Superman. He's the same way. And so logistics is kind of bringing those bullets to the front lines. They need a lot of other things. I don't know this to be true directly. I've heard it said many times. It is said for every soldier on the field, 9 are backing him up. But it doesn't matter if it's 5 or 10 or 20. Someone's packing parachutes, someone making meals, someone's driving trucks. I don't know. The point is, it takes a lot of people to put that one soldier and have him effective on the field. And it's the same way for missions. So churches need to adopt that thinking. They need to realize that, listen, it's not just we say, I love you and our goodbyes, and that's your ministry and that's your mission, and we plug out. No, we're not going to win a battle that way. We're not going to win a war that way. And so we have to support each other at home, but especially out on the field. So logistics need to be effective. I'll make another comment tonight. Logistics need to be swift. They need to not be dragging. It's sad. Sometimes on the battlefield, the bullets get there too late when the battle's already lost. How bad is that? And so the response needs to be quick. I'm glad that we're very quick to help the preachers and the things that are going on in Ukraine. We try to do that year-round for many countries and many missionaries, that we're not really slow in the response, but that we're quick. It's good to have general missions there and a few $1,000s that we can respond financially. But it's more than that. It's even that communication and talking to people and moral support. And sometimes it's going, and sometimes it's texting, and sometimes it's sending letters. But our response needs to be quick. And certainly to get the bullets to the front line, logistics, it needs to be quick. If you look at the enemy, and I would say any cult that's doing a work on a foreign field is the enemy. They're not serving the Lord. If they're not for the Lord, they're certainly for Satan. They're leading people to hell, not to heaven. And you'll find that their response is really quick. And they send a lot of boots on the ground all over the world. And so God's people has to wake up. Back in the 40s, 1945, the Japanese were broken, and MacArthur goes over there. And here's a military general that calls for missionaries. And he wants missionaries to come to Japan. And some did. But we needed way, 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 way more missionaries. And if the response would have been swifter and quicker when that window of time, when they had lost their God and the emperor, and Christians would have came in there, and Bibles would have been there, and logistics would have been there, and the people on the ground, what a difference it would have been even today in a country where they desperately need the gospel in Japan. Same thing in when the USSR broke up. There were some missionaries that were ready to go, and some went, but nowhere near the response that needed to be. And what was the problem? Just the lag in financial support, the lag in the volunteers, the lag in the logistics of getting visas and proper paperwork and whatever they need to get on the field. And this is part of what the church has been tasked with. Sometimes we think of missions, and I want you to listen to me, we think that's something for someone else. And I want you to get the vision. I want Old Time Baptist Church, we have this vision, but I want to expand it, that our view is we are all part of this, and what can I do to help the ultimate goal of getting the gospel around the world? And it has a lot more to do with than just money. I give you the scripture, I think, Romans chapter 12, and it's important that we understand that we have different offices. We're not all preachers. We're not all missionaries. Romans 12:4 says, "For as we have many members in one body, and all members have not the same office," you see that? We don't all have that same office, though we're one. And that's what you got to take away. We're one, so everything we do or don't do affects the whole, affects the body. What the mouth takes in ultimately will affect the hand, affect the foot. You'll have gout, whatever. what one does, it affects the body, but we don't all have the same office. Verse 5 says, so we being many are one body in Christ, and everyone members one of another. That is the biblical truth that I'm teaching and presenting, and I want you to meditate on it and capture it and do something about it and change maybe the way even you're living your life and the way you think. You change the way someone thinks, you got a chance at maybe changing their actions. And that's my prayer tonight, that we just don't think about it, but it starts with the understanding. Number one, logistics is best handled, are you ready, by a team of individuals. You say, why is that you're saying team and individuals? Yeah, because both are true. The more people that get involved, the better. But what I don't want you to do is say, well, I don't have 5 people, so I can't do anything. Well, that's a problem. One person can do a lot with God's help. But you know what would be even better? To have a bunch of people, a team of individuals, and that's when this thing works best. And when a whole church captures this idea. As part of a logistics support team, or whatever we want to call that, if you will, I'm going to give you some things here that you might find yourself involved in if you are willing to do the work of the Lord and help your missionaries and help get the gospel to the regions beyond. And I've given you some bullet points there. And the first bullet point is knowing your missionaries. You got to know them. You're not going to be a very good logistical person if you don't even know what the needs are. Now, I'm going to be straight with you. I'm talking about logistics tonight, and I'm going to say not every person in this room is good at logistics. So you say, well, preacher, then I'm going to tune out because this lesson is not for me. Well, you might have a point. Well, what? I never heard a preacher say that. Not everyone is called to logistics. Not everyone is gifted in logistics. Now, there's something that I'm going to say tonight that applies to you where you can help. Does that make sense? But you got to be able to get some understanding from leadership and the Spirit of God, and just live a little life where maybe you can see some things that will emerge as you grow in the Lord that you're just gifted at, that you're good at. Not everyone is a detail person. Not everyone is an eye dotter and a T-crosser. Not everyone is that person that's got everything planned. And you say you need that for logistics? Not necessarily, but I'm just saying that we are all different. Some things do require everything being written down. Some things require that someone's early and they're pushing something. And some things require the visionary. And there's all different kinds of things that we can do. But we're talking about logistics tonight. And so if you're going to be helpful in logistics, you need to know your missionaries. And you must kind of, by getting to know them, then you become familiar with their needs. My wife and I have been traveling for 20-something years, and what are we doing? We're sitting there, and we're listening, and we're hearing about their needs. Another thing that I do, when I go, I look and try to view with my eyes and my understanding. And after you've traveled for 20-something years, you go into a place, you see what's not there. You see the troubles. And then what you do is you say, well, what can we do to help? Maybe they're not musical. Well, we're going to try to help in music. Maybe they don't, their doctrine is really shallow. They barely know the gospel, and there's no one teaching that. Some places you go, and they have nothing on the family, and they're struggling in their relationships. So what we do a lot of times is just try to plug in with our gifts and say, what can I do to help? I mean, that's just so simple, but it's so effective when it comes to missions. We were in Brazil, and I don't remember who was all on that trip, but the Brother Nichols was looking to buy a piece of property, and actually he wasn't looking. That was something that I suggested that he did. I seen an opportunity, and we set some things up, and you just never know what God will use you to do and to be a blessing to someone, but you got to know what the needs are, and so you got to get to know the missionaries. A great key is just reading missionary letters. You get missionaries letters that come every month. You say, how do I get any missionary letters? All you got to do is tell the office, hey, I would like to get, this missionary letter, or can you put me on this mailing list, or can I email this missionary? They'll put you on their email list. And all you got to do is look at your phone and read that missionary letter. Now, that's going to be a very shallow understanding of their needs. And when we talk about communication and moral support, it's got to go deeper than that. But that's a start to read missionary letters. And just because they're not posted on the wall, and I'm not against that, I'm always trying to find a way to present missions in a better way and get access for people in the church. But don't just say, well, the church doesn't stuff it in my face, so it's their fault. No, it's so easy to get missionary letters. No one has an excuse not to read missionary letters. And I want to encourage you to do that. But you got to get to know your missionaries and know the needs. And then your next bullet point is maintaining accountability in ministry. One of the parts specifically when we talk about logistics is to help someone, and you got to kind of think of maybe a ditch digger. When I'm in the trenches, or I'm building a foundation, or I'm digging a ditch, and I'm in, I got the big yellers on, and I'm in mud up to, just about pouring over the boots, it's kind of hard to make a bunch of phone calls. When I'm sanding drywall and dust is everywhere, or I'm, I got paint all over my fingers and all that, you say, preacher, you still do that? Yeah, I still do that kind of stuff sometimes. And you know what? That'll be the day that I get 15 phone calls. And you got gloves on, or you got, Brother Bia, you got grease on your hands. You know what I mean? It's hard to do all that when you're doing certain tasks. And you say, well, missionaries aren't, they're not hands full of grease and all this stuff. But, well, they're doing a bunch of things. And when you're doing a bunch of things, sometimes it's hard to do all the other logistical things. Sometimes it's hard, if you're putting all the windows in, to be the secretary, to know all the details, and to run the checks to the bank and know what's coming and what visas need due and all that stuff. And missionaries have to handle a lot of things, but churches can help them with the specifics, the logistics of things maybe that could be unburdened so that they could win people to Jesus and build churches. And that's where maybe you come in. And so sometimes it means recording transactions and doing things like that. And then the next bullet point is helping to encourage spiritual growth. You say, they're missionaries. I mean, they're teachers, they're preachers. Don't you know every preacher, every teacher, they need to grow too? And so it is a blessing. And it's amazing. You can have someone, as a preacher, I know this, I could have someone 20 years my junior, and yet they can preach and encourage me. Or they could meet with me, and I could hear them talking about the ministry or winning someone to Jesus, and what an amazing encouragement that is. Your missionaries need that too. And so you can help encourage even spiritual growth in a missionary. Can you imagine that? That God could use you, maybe we'll use the term a layman, which I don't even like that term, just meaning that you're not a preacher, but that God could use you to encourage a missionary's wife, which then encourages the missionary, which keeps him on the field, which helps souls to be saved. And we're going to get to glory and find out, really, it was this lady, in the church that encouraged these other women. And how many of us guys know it's pretty bad at home trying to serve or work or do whatever we got to handle if things are upset with mama. And so if things are good with mama, you can do a lot more. I just know how that is personally. And I'm just saying there's a lot that you can do. And then managing business affairs. Not everyone's a businessman. I meet people around the world, some of them, I think they could barely keep a checkbook, especially in the third world. It's not their thing. And some of them are tremendous businessmen. I was just talking to one, Brother Paul Hamilton in Moldova. Now, he's almost 30, 40 years in Moldova, whatever he is. It's a long time. God is using him right now to coordinate massive things over for Ukraine. Pastors and monies and people and flights and materials. Why? Because that man was a businessman before he was a missionary. And he just is gifted that way. But not every missionary is gifted that way. It doesn't make him a bad missionary. It just means that maybe someone else has to help him with that. My dad was not a very, I'll say this, organized individual. All right? Now, I'm not throwing him under the bus. I'm just saying he was not gifted that way. He was gifted in many other ways, but he was smart enough to put people around him to say, I need you to help me with this or that. He used to call Erica his brains. That was his way of, all the details, all that stuff, and she would chase him around and say, you got to do this, you got to do this, you got to sign this, But what a help to the ministry. A person like a secretary doesn't get a lot of credit. I mean, their name is not up in lights, but if they weren't there, the ministry would not go forward, it would die. And so up in heaven, the rewards for the wife, the rewards for the maintenance people, the people that are just kind of the support, logistical support, are going to share. Just like David, when he told those soldiers, hey, those that stay by the stuff, they're going to share equal. I mean, there was that, well, we went to the front lines. Yeah, but they stood and kept everything going back here. And David said, hey, everyone's sharing equally. And I believe that's God's view. And so maybe you can help them in some way with business affairs. And then attending to personal details. Now, these are vague things. I don't have a lot of time to elaborate tonight. But there's all kinds of personal things that people need. And it's just endless. If you are an American and you're living in a foreign country, it's very difficult to take care of things. Have you ever traveled anywhere, even to another state? Have you ever had to call and say, I need, this done, or your mind is thinking, oh, who's going to take care of this? You say, yeah, but they got everything already settled before they go over there. Really? You think they got no family, no concerns, you're just not thinking. And so there's a lot of things that you can do to help. Now, they're not going to just call you out of the blue because they don't know you and you don't know them. But the more you get to know those missionaries, and that's where it starts, and to be able to just communicate with them and talk with them and share their burdens, you'd be surprised that they might call and say, hey, listen, could you do this for me? I have people now that I've been doing it so long and they know that I'm willing to help. They don't even call me anymore. Now, Brother Malucci, I'm on the internet. He did send me a message about bringing an iPad or pod or whatever. Could you bring this to me? And of course I said yes. But I noticed last week I got a package and there was some Iron Man watch or something in there. He didn't call me about anything, but I'm assuming that's not a gift from Nick Malucci. I'm just assuming that he wants me to bring this or take care of this or whatever. And we do that all the time. And you say, well, I don't want to be bothered. I don't want to be put out. Someone's going to ask me to do something. No, it's a blessing to serve and to be a help. And I love that. And my dad taught me that. And that's kind of the old culture, especially the Italian culture. If you're really friends, then you're not always looking for reciprocation, or you're not looking for dollars or sawing pennies in half. If I called my dad and said, Dad, oh man, you're coming to the house, I'm out of eggs, can you bring me a dozen eggs? And he brought a dozen eggs, and I got out my pocket and started to give him $1.29 or $10, whatever eggs are going for. If I try to give him, $2.22, he would have been so highly insulted, because friends don't do that. I'm your friend, you're my son. Listen, if I need something, I'd ask you. And friends don't keep score. Real friends. Sometimes we do that. We kind of keep score. And so it's a blessing to me when a missionary can just ask questions and all of that. And you're going to find people that will put you out or take advantage. That's a whole nother subset category. I don't have time to teach tonight. There's a lot of different cultures. Other cultures. You get to like the islands, let's say St. Lucia. Their culture is, Philippines is very similar. If you can do something for someone, then they just ask. They have no shame. An American, like if I ask you, hey, I like your watch. That's a nice watch. Will you give me that watch? You might be offended. You might be put out. It may create an awkward situation because you may not want to give the watch and all of that. And then what do you do? Like an American has no clue what to do with that. But over in those countries, that's their culture. And there's no problem if he says, no, I really like this watch. I can't give you that. Okay, we go down the road. Not in America. I mean, because we just created a problem. But like in St. Lucia, it's that way where, and I've told this story all over the world, and people still don't believe it. I'll take the time to tell you tonight, I was with Sam Filbert many, many years ago. We were on the island. We went to a tent meeting. We were just attending. It wasn't even our tent meeting. The transformer that they used to convert the power was there at the tent, and it blew up. And so Filbert tells me, hey, come on, we're going to go up and to the hills. I drove up with him. We followed the lights. It's dark. We knocked on this door where there was a glow of a television set. And Filbert, he's talking in patois, and he's saying "Mueble," blah 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 blah, and I want this, that, whatever. And then he tells me, go in there and get this transformer. It's a box about this big, very heavy little transformer. And I go in there and I pull it out of the wall. The lights go dark, the TV goes dark, and we grab this transformer and we walk out. And I go into the truck, so obviously we're going to use this transformer for the tent meeting. We're driving down the hill, and I said, oh, where do you know that lady from? He says, I don't know that lady. I couldn't believe it. I was like, what? What? We just went in there, and what is she going to do, But their culture is, if you can help, it's almost like, you just help. There's a lot of people, and it kind of makes sense in some way. There's a lot of people that are sitting there. It's dark. I mean, they're at a meeting, and you can help. And the lady, has an obligation in some way, but she can also say no, and there's no offense. But there's no offense to ask the lady. And so you have to learn these things. But I'm just saying it's different in different places. But where was I? I was talking about God gives us differently. Where was my last blank? I was talking about the body of Christ. Where did I go? Man, I'm hearing. Okay, logistics support. I'm at logistics support begins before they go. Do you see that spot? Let's pick up there. I've got a lot to say tonight. I'm going to try to keep moving. You say, what do you mean before they go? Well, by God's grace, we're going to send more missionaries out of this church. I mean, God may call people here, and we need to be ready. I'm planning for not just one, multiple missionaries going out of our church. We have sent preachers a lot in the America here and around town and New York, and there's preachers that have come out of this church. What a blessing! But I believe if we keep serving the Lord and people get saved, I'm praying for laborers. I'm praying that missionaries go. Well, maybe God hasn't given us missionaries because we don't have the logistic support level ready to help them. But really, in any church and in any group of missionaries, the logistics support has to begin before they go. You can't start it when they're on the field. Number one, encouragement in spiritual growth starts before they go. Senders must send ones who have been trained. Those that, my dad was big on teaching personal relationships. That was a class he taught. He taught it out of Strength and Beauty. He taught it out of his Bible. He taught it out of just many different books. He'd always run back to personal relationships. And we just were telling what he wasn't good at. He was good at personal relationships. That was a strength of my dad. But you know how many missionaries have failed in the first year because of personal relationships? Because they struggle. Maybe it's just they struggle with the struggle in America, or maybe it's a cultural thing. Sometimes it's both. I have been places where I maybe have been in a place like, let's use St. Lucia, for example. I was at a meeting in St. Lucia. A new missionary came, and I have already had, at that time, over 10 years coming to St. Lucia. I knew the culture. I knew the people. And he got up and said some things that were talking personal relationships was a big no-no. And in just the first few months that he was there, he had already alienated those people, and he ended up, within just a couple of years, ended up coming back home very sad. And so as we're training people in Sunday schools and on the bus routes and preaching and all of that, personal relationships is key, and it's big. And it's great to be in a church where people do travel and go to different fields. And it's great to have a cross-cultural community. We've got Africans and we've got Haitians and we've got people from all around the world in this church. It amazes me how many languages we have. That's a great gift to this church. You think God just does that by accident? He's not going to use us in some other way to utilize those things? I know one thing. When God assembles a team, He does it for a reason. And God just might call you to be a help and encourage someone to even train them to open their eyes in the way of dealing with people and personal relationships. You know, it's different everywhere we go. You can make mistakes. You know, I'll throw myself under the bus. I've made mistakes. Well, I'll throw me and Jeff under the bus. Me and Jeff Bullard were over in the Philippines years ago. I mean, more than a dozen years ago. And the preacher, I mean, he's a big preacher. I mean, everyone knows him. He's very famous, has a church of thousands. And he's joking with us. We're joking back. And I mean, we got into both of us got into big trouble. And I don't remember who talked to him, but I know who talked to me. And they were pretty highly offended that we were joking with the preacher in that way. They have kind of a authority structure, and you can joke this way. A father can joke with a kid, but a kid doesn't look up at dad and starts cracking jokes back. And you certainly don't do that to a preacher. And I'm saying that you can make mistakes. You have to learn personal relationships. There's things you got to learn, and it's got to start really before they go. And then 2, encouragement and spiritual growth on the field is also important. So this comes into play even if they've not come out of our church. You got to understand, and I want to educate you. It would be just a missed opportunity if I don't impart some of the things that the Lord has taught me over the years to our church. But you got to understand that people on the mission field, they need encouragement. They need to be spiritually helped and encouraged just like people do at home. They don't have the camp meetings, most of them. They don't have the family conferences, most of them. They don't have what we have. They don't even have, they're studying in another language. Maybe they're trying to immerse themselves. So, you know, there's no books in their language to read that we would have like we would have in English. And so it's just a difficult dynamic. And soon what you find is yesterday's prayers, you know, they don't help for, you know, today. And what you find is what you learn in the last 5 years, you exhaust all of that. I learned that, when God called me to take over things here when my dad was down in that first year. I don't know if you remember. First year I came in, Dad went down in February. We had about 2 months where it was kind of like popcorn preaching and different things. Then in April, we started the building project. That was one of the first big decisions that I had to make when Dad had said, I would encourage you to put Brother Lewin as the interim pastor, and the staff said, you know, that's a good idea, and we went forward, and I had to make decisions about this. So what do? We started this building project. Well, that's just a great way to start a brand new person in the pastorate, right? I mean, be here 12, 14, 16 hours a day, and then try to pastor the church. Well, what I found is, and I don't know how God got me through, it's only God. I mean, by working and being pulled and being green and all of that. But you know what? In the first year of my preaching, I had exhausted everything I had studied over the last 10, 15 years. I did a lot of preaching on Joseph, if you remember. I taught other things that God had taught me. But after a year, I was sitting there going, now what do I teach? Now what do I say? I felt like that in Ukraine. We went and did 16 sessions in 4 days, the first marriage conference, 16 sessions. I mean, I teach our couples class here, then next week. You know, there's only 52 weeks in a year. You know, you do 3 or 4 or 5 years like that, and I told those people in Ukraine, I don't know anything else. I'm going to have to go back and start digging. But a missionary's like that. A missionary will go and they're building houses, or they're trying to, you know, just saw lumber. They're trying to get to know the people. There's an immense amount of things that they're doing, and they will exhaust all of those things spiritually. And so we don't normally think that we could help them, but you can. You can send them a book. You can link them to a message that was a blessing to you. You can be a real difference maker when it comes to, feeding that missionary. And I want to encourage you to think in those terms. Hebrews 5:12 talks about teachers, and certainly a missionary needs to not be a novice, but you never arrive. You never learn it all. You do need to be able to eat meat, because as a minister, you're going to be handling complex problems. But Hebrews 5:12 says, "For when for the time ye ought to be teachers, ye have need that one teach you again, which be the first principles of the oracles of God, and are become such as have need of milk and not of strong meat." So when I'm working with missionaries, I'm trying to think of how to help them and what they could even handle. When someone's really hurting, it's kind of hard, someone's sick, you don't just say, okay, here's a heavy steak dinner, and shove it down their throat. You kind of got to give them a little soup, you got to feed them. And you say, preacher, that's your calling, that's not mine. You'd be surprised how much logistically you could just be a help and a support to your missionaries. And I want to just encourage you to maybe expand your horizons. And again, I'm not speaking specifically with logistics to every person. I've already said that. But maybe the Lord would open your heart and say, I think I could do this or I could do that. Number 3, a missionary needs encouragement in spiritual growth when they come back home. Now, we just had missions conference. We just had missionaries that have come through. And what time is it? That says it's 3 minutes to the hour. But that clock is way wrong. 7:58. Okay, so we are not finishing. So we are not finishing this tonight. All right, I will come back on this. All right, I'll give you a couple things and then we'll wrap it up. I know you have had a long day, and I'm telling you, when I get into this, I could probably teach for 2 hours, and I feel like passionate. This is really important. All right, but I know that you've had a long day. But a missionary needs help and encouragement and growth when they come back home. We just had missions conference, and you've seen people that they encouraged and helped us, but I'm telling you, and you got to keep this in mind, anytime you have a missionary that comes home, it's your opportunity to encourage them. And they will grow spiritually in a missions conference just like you will grow spiritually in a missions conference. And so you just need to know that when you're working with missionaries. Again, a missionary doesn't have all of the modern conveniences that we have, and I'm not just talking about microwaves. I'm talking about the opportunity to meet. Do you know how many missionaries, what they would give to be at the family conference that's coming up here in just a couple of weeks? We've got Brother Keenan coming in. He's going to preach. We got a doubleheader on Wednesday night. Brother Dufour is going to be there. Then Brother Fugit. If you miss Brother Fugit, you're talking about someone that is, a big name in our circles that the Lord has used all the way up to, when President Trump was in there. There's pictures of him in the beast with, Donald Trump. And you need to glean from that guy's wisdom. And he's unassuming. You'll come in. He's not a lot of flash and bang. But if you miss, that Thursday and Friday that he's here, he may never be here again. But a missionary would die to be here, to hear that. And sometimes we just think, it's just another service. But they don't have what we have. Just like all the food that we have, maybe the third world doesn't have. We don't appreciate it as much. But so what's the problem? We assume that it's not a big deal. You have all these resources because we have these resources. And they don't have those resources. So when they come in to a meeting, when we were in Ukraine, there was a pastor that was Ukrainian that was called to Siberia, Russia. He drove 7 days with 5 of his family members, his kids. He's got a large family. 7 days to come to the meeting. And it was like the first meeting that he had been with multiple pastors. And that little meeting that was just a little room about this big was a huge deal to that national, I call him national pastor, but really he's a missionary, Ukraine, in serving in Russia. And can you imagine, even then, before the war, Ukrainians are not very well loved in Russia. Dangerous mission. And for that guy, keep him in prayer, though you don't know him by name, because I guarantee he's probably in some way in harm's way. But you can help by sending messages, sending music. How many times has a song been a blessing to you? And I hope that you're listening to good conservative music and that it's a blessing. Share that with a missionary. I mean, just that you would be concerned about them, that you would send something like that. Books help. If you find things, we're talking to logistics, and I'll end with this tonight. And we won't have a big invitation or anything. We'll take a little time and pray and just say, Lord, what would you have me to do? And that's what the invitation probably will be. But sometimes it's a blessing when you chase down books in a language for a missionary. Some books, like the love languages, they've been translated in a lot of different languages. So you can get those books. You can bring them into the Spanish-speaking world. You can bring them in. But certain languages, it's much more difficult. But if you will do the legwork, and you'd be surprised, you think, well, all you got to do is go on the internet and find this. But not everyone's like you. You tell me to get on there and do this or do that with a cell phone, or Winstead laughs. Some simple thing, cut and paste and do this, whatever. I'm like, Winstead, you got to help me, because if you don't, it's going to be 2 hours sitting here, because I'm an ignorant person when it comes to that stuff. Now I'm good at finding books. Miss Joni asked me to find some books. I'll get on there and I'll find them. Some of you are gifted in different ways, and so don't assume that the missionary, he can just find this book or whatever. I mean, you could find that for him in Spanish. What a blessing that would be. And then you can offer that logistical support and say, hey, I'll send you 50 of them for the field. And that would be a great help. We've had some of our marriage conference materials translated. And we've worked to do that in Spanish, and we've had them in Romanian, and we've had them translated in Russian. I mean, just a simple handout like you got tonight. I mean, do you know what that means in the third world? I mean, you sit there with pastors, they will use it. An American will throw it away. I mean, the things that I handed out today, I would be shocked if 2 people had them in a week. Now, I hope that's not the case, but I know Americans. Now, if I was sitting here with a bunch of national pastors in the third world, they'd have those, they'd copy those, they would go out and teach those, they would use those as precious resources. And I'm just saying, the things that maybe you think are not very valuable are very valuable to them. So if you had a message that you loved and it was a blessing to you, and you had it translated, or you had it where you put in some fill in the blanks or some kind of teaching material. Some of you are gifted that way. I teach, but I'm not the most gifted teacher and setting all this stuff up. Usually when I put a handout out, my wife goes, you need to let me approve your handouts. You've got spelling errors and grammatical errors and all this stuff, and then you don't even fill in all the blanks. That drives my wife nuts. Some of you know what I'm talking about. But I'm just trying to get you to open your eyes. I'll try to come back to this. I've got a lot more to say. Save your handout. All right, we'll have a test. No, just kidding. I'll try to bring some more in. But I don't know when I'll get back to this. Maybe Wednesday. I don't know. But let's all stand. We'll have a verse of invitation. Think of how you can help. Ask the Lord, Lord, how can I help? You may be quiet. You may not be the best person to go knock on doors. God still wants you to be a witness. God still wants you to hand out tracts. But you may be gifted in other ways. And in ways that maybe a public speaker, they're not gifted the way you're gifted. And so we want to use our gifts for the Lord. And so let's take a little time and just pray, whether it's at the altar or in your seats, and say, Lord, what is it that you'd have me to do?